Next order of business is the roll call of members. Please indicate your presence when the machine is open. If all the members voted, tally the roll.
I'm Earl Harris. Welcome to another edition of Sessions.
Sorry,
I'm joined by my co-host, Blake Johnson, who couldn't let me get the open out before commenting.
I just thought like a nice extra effect might be interesting for this episode.
Yeah, you're wrong.
It didn't work?
It didn't
no
work.
echo?
You left me out.
We are joined today. So actually, I wanted, before I introduce whom is with us today, earlier today ended the first half of session. So if we look a little worn out, that's why. But it actually is perfect timing because we are joined today by Representative Matt Lehman. He is the majority floor leader. He's also the state representative for House District 79. He's going to talk to us about the first half, give us some of his insights, tell us about what he thinks we did good, maybe some things we did bad, and just basically talk about the first half and also prep us for the second half as we do a little bill swapping where the bills that pass out of the Senate come over to us in the House and the bills that we pass out of the House slide over to the Senate. So, Representative Lehman, welcome to Sessions.
Glad I could be here. Well, I felt honored. Like,
It really, you should feel that way. Yeah, we're glad it was. It's not too far out of the way on your way home, right? Like this.
Well, okay. I sent Earl a text because I was on my way here and I had like 8 miles to get here, and I thought, why does my meter say I'm 7 miles to empty? I think I better stop. And realized I normally stop and get gas as I'm going north.
Oh, sure.
And I was now going south. Yeah. So I was running out of space.
It could have been Sessions live from the side of the road.
So. Yeah, we could have had you call
that. That wouldn't have gone well.
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone well. Well, we're glad you're here.
So it's not out of my way. Always enjoy it.
So let's talk about this. We earlier today ended the first half of the 2025 session.
Yes,
Generally, what's your thoughts on how things went? I know we asked you that question knowing you are in the supermajority.
Yeah. So I would say, because you get asked that question every year, it's interesting when we go into the session, people will say, what's going to be the big issue, right? What's going to be the big issue? And I remember the first 7 or 8 years I was here, I always had this like big plan of what's going to be the issue. And now I just tell them, I have no idea. Because you come in with so many moving parts to stuff. Now, we do know, as you guys know, coming into this year, we are coming into a budget year. So that kind of, I don't want to say sucks all the energy out of the room, but everything kind of filters through that. Almost every piece of legislation has some touch of that budget. And so that kind of is where you start the year. Like you're already in December, you're already looking kind of, okay, what's the structure of this budget going to look like? The governor's going to put his budget together, and then we're going to have our budget. And then, our perfect budget that we just sent to the Senate, they're going to feel is not perfect. And so they're going to do their thing to it. And
Did you vote for the budget, Earl?
Did you vote for the budget, Blake? No, I did not. Sorry.
Go ahead. Okay, perfect budget. Go ahead.
Let me go.
It's so great. Yeah.
Let me rephrase that to near perfect, to the near perfect budget. And so you kind of feel like it's like I told someone the other day. I said we kind of start things off with a sledgehammer, and by April we're down to the surgical the scalpel, because you kind of throw stuff out like, okay, what's this really going to do? What's this going to impact? Budget's really kind of in some ways no different. I will say this is the first time I came in and I got elected in 2008, came in 2009. And so for the first 2 years I was here, we were in the minority. But if you remember 2008 and 2009, we were into that recession time. And so we came in the last part of April with like, guess what, Indiana, we're not going to have any money. I mean, it is going to be tight. Yeah. And so it got to the point where we got to cut. We got to cut here, we got to cut here, we got to cut here, we got to cut here. Last place we cut was education. But we actually went home. We didn't adjourn. We just recessed at the end of April. Mm-hmm. And everybody kind of came together and said, look, we got to put together a budget that we can pass by July the 1st. And it was the first time I think I felt like I experienced it. This is what it's going to be like every 2 years. This is not going to be fun, right? Yeah. But what it was you kind of got that first experience of it's what happens on that last day. And we really got to that point where it's like, okay, now we got to kind of recoup. And so then we went through a phase over the next several years where economy improved, different levers we had pulled were starting to generate revenue. And we got to where what's on the list of projects, right? Project here, project there, this district needs that, this district needs that, these bridges need here, this state park needs this new building. And now suddenly this year we kind of come back into the, hey, we're not going to have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so that first forecast of like a 3% increase the first year, and then a kind of a flat. And I think, Earl, you're on Ways and Means. I mean, you kind of, I told the speaker years ago, Bos was a speaker. I said, if you ever put me on Ways and Means, I'll quit because I said I'm kind of ADD, So it's like watching those guys work till 8 o'clock at night. It's like it's not too much for me.
Yeah, our meetings do go a little late. One of the things, as you said, last few years, we've had money that came in because of COVID and some other things, and now we're having to adjust to not having that money.
Yeah.
And it is tweaking a lot. I know when we were going through amendments on the floor, Representative or Ways and Means Chairman Thompson kept saying to us Democrats, I think that's a great idea, but we don't have money because the budget's tight. So, I mean, it's a little bit different this year when we got used to having some funds.
And I think that's just it. I think it's although I'll say this, and maybe you guys will disagree with me on this. I think it's going to sound weird. It's easier to say no when you don't have the funds. I mean, it's when you got to make tough decisions, you begin to really prioritize, and you do make some tough decisions. And I think it's harder when you have a bucket of money and 20 people want a piece of that bucket, and now you're like, okay, I got to kind of maybe pick winners and losers. Now you just tell everybody that wants to, there's just nothing in the bucket, So I think on secondary education, a lot of people came, I got this new building I want to put in, or I got this new project I want to build, and it's like, we're going to maintain, we're going to give you money to rehab and refurbish, but there's just not going to be much money to build new, and it'll see what happens in April. I mean, I don't want to say we're way optimistic, but you got to be optimistic that maybe the numbers are going to get a little better, but we'll see.
I'm still hopeful for the Earl Harris Library for kids who don't read good. Matt,
is it well?
Matt,
lots of pictures.
Matt, you're the first member of Republican leadership that's been on, which is true, right? We
Yes.
haven't had a Republican leader.
Okay,
We haven't had a leader.
to
We've
be
had
fair,
chairman.
have you invited Republican?
You're the
leaders?
first Republican member of the leadership team that we've both invited and has agreed to come on.
Yes.
We are
All right.
1 for 1.
1 for 1.
And,
Now,
and
and
I
other
know we're
Republicans
only
have
like
come on.
10 minutes into this, but am I going to regret that I'm the only one that showed up?
Well, we'll just see how you answer this question. So you're in leadership, right? So I think it's fair to say in leadership, in the majority, you have a fairly good idea of what's going to happen day to day on the floor. So I guess I would ask you, through that prism,
you couldn't even get that out without laughing at yourself.
did anything surprise you this half?
Not really.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it's hard to surprise you at this point.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, I would say there's. I'm not going to say this was a surprise by any means, but I think one sign that I've seen maybe over the years that has gotten improvement is actually the number of either bipartisan sponsored bills or Democrat authored bills. I mean, there was a day there were 3 Democrat bills in a row. And I remember the first year I was here as the minority, I don't think we had any bills on the calendar that were ours, And I felt like I thought Brian kind of did a good job, Speaker Bosma, of starting to set the stage of, okay, just because it's the other party is not a bad idea, and that's it's.
We appreciate that.
Well, and I'll say this: I think you guys, I think maybe say the same thing back at your town halls, is I tell people, please don't put us in that box of Washington D.C. Because I think Washington, D.C. is really, it has become dysfunctional in the way of it's us against them. If you're the us, then they're the them, right? And if you're the them, then they're the us. And I said the one thing here has been, and I could tell you names of people from the past: Greg Fry, Ryan Dvorak, not Ryan Dvorak, Hatfield, Ryan Hatfield. Yeah. Guys that would just beat the crap out of me on the House floor on an issue, on an amendment, and then they'd come around and put their arm around you and say, hey, you okay? How's the family? I was like, because I think we honestly care about the people as much as the policy. And sometimes policy can get us a little bit wound up and we get too deep in the weeds on some stuff. But I do think what I've seen that I will applaud is over the years, I've seen a much more mutual respect, you might say, okay, this idea is not a bad idea, and let's get this to the floor. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. If you'd have ever thought there'd be a Vanessa Summers bill on our calendar, in the past it just it never got a committee and whatever it might be. But then me working with Vanessa the other day was really a treat because I've never done that.
Yeah.
And so she was very, very receptive to that. And so I think I don't want to say we've turned a corner because we were never really in a bad place. But I think I hope what you guys see is the minority. I mean, I guess it's your show, but if I'd ask you the question, did you see anything this first half that surprised you?
Well, I think we can answer that question. I do want to say, one, you always say to me you think that 50% of the bill should be Democrat. You always say that to me on the floor, and so I want to make sure that's on the air.
Do we have an affidavit ready?
No, I guess before we answer, we'll answer your question, but I want to say that is true. I think there is a collegiality and Democrat bills moving. Now, obviously, we'd like to see more of that, right? But at the same time that's happening, the overall divisiveness of our politics has gotten worse. And not necessarily in our building all the time, right?
No.
But from a national perspective. So how do you think that gets managed, right? Because both our parties still are moving a little further into the wings. And that's a tough question, but
it's a tough question. I wish there was an easy answer. I guess I would say, we talk to our members, and I always say as the majority leader, one of the advantages I have is I always get to sit down with all the new freshmen. Mm-hmm. And one of the first questions I ask them is, why are you here? Tell me why you're here. And then I listen, because what I want to hear is, are you here to be a servant of your constituents? Mm-hmm. Are you here because of an issue? Like, I'm here to solve this problem, or are you here to I want to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
And I have a picture outside my door. And when we're done talking, I take him out to that picture, and I said, okay, I want you to name me one person in this picture. It's from 1879. And it's like, I don't know anybody in that picture. And I said, but that's you 100 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
But if those guys didn't do their job, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So you have a job to do, do it respectfully. And I think that based on that is we need more people who, when I talk to them, I hear, I want to learn. I want to learn how to be a better legislator. I want to learn what are the issues I need to be engaged in. Mm-hmm. And I also tell people, don't understand, and I love this. I love that our legislature is made up of people who have day jobs. Mm-hmm. They bring their expertise to the table. Yeah. I do insurance. You got people who they're farmers. You got people that are engineers.
Professional models.
Yeah. I looked over here, Earl. It's kind of a one-way street there, to be honest with you.
Sorry,
but it's you. But you bring that expertise to the table, and so what it does is it makes you reach out to those who, okay, I need to talk to you because this is more your area, and I think that's the more people understand that we're all kind of in this together. We're absolutely, don't get me wrong, we're absolutely gonna have different ideas on how we get there. And we're going to have just polarizing ideas of what we even should be doing. But if I respect who you are and what you do and why you're here, I think we're going to do better. And I hope we keep the people out that have kind of that scorched earth approach. I'm here to burn it down and start over.
Well, in a minute, we'll have you name who's answered the question poorly.
Okay.
But he asked us, what surprised you this half?
What surprised me? I think we as Democrats have a decent amount of our bills that pass through. So, although I think in my history this is my 9th year, I think budget year is usually a better year for us as Democrats to get. And I know we get, because it's a longer session, we get more bills. Everyone gets more opportunity there. But I think we've got a good amount of bills that have been passed. And I'm glad to see that. And I think Blake and I have actually had this conversation, is that sometimes our fellow Democrats put up bills that we go, there's no way they're going to pass that. So I think part of what
there's some Republicans who do that too, by the way.
Yeah. So I think part of what we as Democrats have to think about is, okay, what's the likelihood of this getting passed? Or are you just going to file this as a message? Are you filing this because you can go home and say, I filed that bill? Yeah. But do you really want to get some good legislation passed? And I think that's what we have to keep in mind. And I think also, I said this, and I know a little bit, my background has been connected to this place before I got here, but relationships equal resources. And I think that's part of what I hope that our fellow Democrats remember, is that you got to have that. I can't look at you as a Republican and think you're the worst person on the planet. Because you're not.
No.
Just because you have an R behind your name,
top
you're
five.
Top five.
not. Top
is
five
really-
worst?
yeah.
Well, I thought we said top 10. I thought we agreed to top 10.
Oh,
Wait,
sure. Yeah, it's in the
Can
script.
I be 11? I don't want to be in the top 10.
I will say. I will say
that'd
this,
be cool.
and I'm not
One of
poking
those.
fun here. I'm being serious. I was surprised by the speaker's bill this year, the Illinois Commission on that. Actually, legitimately, earnestly, I mean, it surprised me. It is an interesting conversation, and I think the debate on the floor was compelling and interesting. But that was a piece of legislation I did not expect to see coming into the first half, and it's on its way to the Senate. So
Yeah, I'll be honest with you too. I didn't expect that either. I mean, we sat down early in the year and about December sometime, and Todd was talking. Okay, here's some of our priorities. We know we have to, and I think you guys are on board on some of this. At least is some of the healthcare costs. We have to control some of that. So those are two of our priority bills. We talked about education reform, and we're talking about the things that are normally our agenda items or things that we can maybe find some common ground on. And then he says, and then I've got this bill here that's going to create the Illinois-Indiana, boundary line commission. I'm like, why? What's that about? And then you start looking into it more, and you're like, okay, it really raises a civics class kind of level issue of, what do you do with boundaries? I'm a Civil War guy, right? I love that era, and I look and think, West Virginia, when Virginia seceded, West Virginia said, we don't want to go. So there was like 5 counties, and they said, okay, we're going to stay over here. Can we become our own state? And the government said, yeah, you can be your own state. So it's happened. And I remember one of the bills that Dvorak's had for a number of years is the Michigan line is not where like it was supposed to be. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, are these lines sacred? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think meriting that discussion, and it's not just here. You hear about it in Oregon. You hear about it in Washington State. California, and I think is 50 the number that we've just landed now and said, okay, it is 50, it never shall be 51. Because if you look back at history, I said we had, I think it was 6 states that from the time 1900 to 1959, I think 6 states joined the Union in that 60-year period. And in the 60 years since then, none. And I'm not saying that we should go out and start recruiting states. I'm just, I think it'd be a wonderful civics class topic with a bunch of kids to say, should we have more than 51 states or 50 states? And I think when people be like, no, you got to have 50. Look at the flag. You can't change the flag.
And I think what's interesting to me from the perspective of even the conversation today is that, it actually is illustrative a little bit of the divide, though, right? Like, I mean, part of this is happening because there are counties in Illinois that feel disenfranchised by their Democrat government, right? So then, in the conversation today, it's partly, where, Democrat bills getting through and all that stuff aside, right? There are times when you feel like you just can't move the needle on the things you care about. And in the super minority, it feels even a little more strongly than that, right? So you've got this kind of weird discussion about, if you don't feel like you've got a place in the government at your state, what do you do? Like, what is your recourse? And so it really is to your point, as I'm a former teacher, like there's an incredibly interesting civics conversation here, but it also, like, I keep just kind of coming back to, like, man, we're getting so divided from a national level that, the 65% of people say they're exhausted by politics. And I wonder if a solution, part of a solution is the boundary, can another solution be like, what do we do to fix that divide?
Well, and the thing I would say, and I don't want go off on a tangent here, but a discussion around just the engagement of people. Again, being a student of history, I've read a book. I read a book sometimes. I've read a book, right? Yeah. Remember that one time I read a book? Yeah. I'll show it to you sometime. It's got big letters on the front. Some characters on the
little blue truck. I read that book.
Yes, thank you. It's one of my favorites. It was on the Lincoln Douglas debates and how they went all around Illinois. And one of the things that amazed me was they would go into a town of 4,000 or 5,000 people, which is about the size of my community, right? And then they would start at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon to begin their debate. And if their debate got long, they would actually break for supper, and then people would go home, and then they'd come back like at 7:30 to complete the debate. Yeah. And I thought, we live in a society today where if you don't get your message out in 8 words or less, or 5, some tweet or some Facebook post, it's like people lose interest.
Yeah.
And I think, are we really disengaging from the public? If you said, okay, I'm going to have a town hall and we're going to be here for the next 2.5 hours debating an issue, people are going, I'm not going there for 2.5 hours. Right. I think people were engaged, and I know we've had issues around voting and early voting and things like that. But there's an amendment a couple years ago on extending the hours, and I said I went back and looked. The last presidential year in which we had no early voting, the day only, and then absentee for certain reasons, we had a much higher voter turnout than we do now with 30 days of early voting and much more reasons you can vote remote. And I thought, why is that? Why is it that we've gotten, and it just keeps getting worse. And so I don't know that it's like, well, we're cutting this off from voting or these hours from voting. I think we're disengaging the people. And I don't know if it's because they feel like they're not being heard. Do they feel like, oh, there's so much division and why should I even say anything? How do we bring them back to that conversation like this? A conversation where we can disagree on policy, but we're not disagreeable. And if there was a crowd here in this room, we'd say, okay, what are you guys thinking? What are you thinking?
There's not even a crowd listening.
Very good.
I have a lot of cousins.
Yeah. You do, yeah.
Oh, but that doesn't mean they're listening.
I let my kid just push play over and over again to keep our numbers high. Yeah. No, you're. I think you're right. Like not necessarily on the lack of expanded voting hours and all that stuff, but on the idea that there has been a disengagement. There's been a civic kind of disillusionment, perhaps, for whatever reason, on both sides. And I think it's posing a significant problem. And civics education, all of it, we're struggling a little bit, I think, for this time.
And people, I don't know if people always understand, and I've said this when I've spoken at town halls or whatever event, is we literally make decisions that impact almost every aspect of your life. If it's healthcare, if it's the environment, if it's workforce, if it's, go on and on and on. And I think sometimes people are like you said, not engaged and don't think about the fact that this group of people we elected, or hopefully you voted, are making these decisions that impact everything you do. And I think, I don't know if we need to do more of that, if we've lost that in the K-12 world so that people aren't engaged. If it's that the parents, the adults have lost engagement, so therefore they're not teaching it to their kid. But, the other thing, I'm a Democrat. We're Democrat, you're Republican. But my thing is I want everybody to vote. D or R, you need to get engaged in the process. Even if you don't vote for the person I want you to vote for, get in the game and do something. Don't just sit there and say, this is horrible. Did you vote? No. Okay, well, then you can't talk.
Yeah, and I tell people, I said, that if I went by all the people who told me they voted for me, I wonder why I didn't win 100%. But I said, I had a lady come up to me. I was working a poll during the primary, and I had a lady come to me. She said, I'm not voting for you. And I said, okay. And I said, can I ask you why? Yeah. And she told me the reason why. And she goes, I hope that didn't bother you. I said, no, actually, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Because you had the chutzpah to come and tell me, hey, I see you, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you before I even walk in that room, that I'm not voting for you. That was refreshing.
Yeah.
It kind of was, I mean, I don't like the idea someone doesn't vote for me, but it was refreshing that we had that kind of, there's that honesty in that issue.
You'd love my wife then.
Yeah.
She
doesn't vote for you.
She doesn't vote for you. Two elections. But now she's come around.
I'm not voting for you. Not voting for you.
It's only because you have a kid with her.
That's right. It helps.
It helps.
Matt, you've served in the minority. I guess one of the questions, we were running out of time here, but, how did having started your career in the minority shape the way that you act as majority leader?
Oh, I can answer that with one example. I came in, I had a bill that at the time the law allowed you to, you could get your property taxes electronically, but you could not pay electronically. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that seems odd. And I came out of county council, right? So I have this county experience. So I had a bill that allowed for the payment of, you had to get it sent to you. You had to acknowledge that you got the email, acknowledge that so that way you know what you're paying. And I had all these parameters set in place. And I got a co-author on the bill, a Democrat co-author, Joe, I'm not good with names, that's my age. But he was my co-author. And then it didn't go anywhere. It got assigned to Ways and Means, and it sat there. And basically what the answer was is it can't have a Republican freshman as the author. And I thought, okay, and I got a little plaque on my desk that's from Ronald Reagan that says, it doesn't matter, you can get a lot accomplished, you don't care who gets the credit. So I was willing to take my name off that. But like I came off the bill. Like I never got to go back on. And so I remember thinking at that time, it was a little politics maybe here or there with a freshman legislator, but I thought, it's not fair. And I thought if we're ever in a position of authority and have the some power, even with a super majority, I'm never going to say you're irrelevant to me. And that's kind of how I felt that first term. I kind of felt irrelevant. Like, I don't need you, right? And so I thought, I'm not going to be like that. And I think Bosman was a little bit like that. And that's kind of, he brought me into leadership. But I think that's the key thing we have to focus on is everybody there comes with their idea, their value, their issue. They need to be able to say what that is. And if I look at, Blake, hey, that's I appreciate that idea, but it's a horrible idea. Yeah. Okay?
You have said that.
I've never said that to Earl, by the way.
Yeah, no one does.
But I think that's, to me, is what I learned from the minority was not, I wanted to be treated with respect. Didn't necessarily feel like I got that.
Yeah.
Now, not so. I think it came more from the leadership. Not like your dad. Honestly, one of the best people I ever knew there. He was such a good man. He came up to me many times and have a good weekend. How you doing? Asked about my family. And then, sadly, when he was gone, your mom came in, and then she became one of my favorite persons.
Thank you.
She really did. But it's
notice he didn't say I was one of his favorite persons.
And then their kid.
Osmosis.
No, but but I'll say this too. I think it comes down to relationship building too. Is that if you and I have built a trust, then maybe the issue might not be 100% what I'm thinking. But will you work with me to get to a better place and things like that? I think that's what we're doing better than when I was in the minority.
And I got to say, when I came in as a freshman, that as you walk around the building and start meeting people, like it was actually kind of obvious who had served in the minority and who hadn't, right? There was just a different level of treatment. And you're a great example, just right. It's like from day one, we're so kind and so welcoming. And I mean, you have played a role in killing legislation of mine, however, but still.
Earl, what's this guy's name again? What's your name?
Bob. Bob Johnson. But I just I would acknowledge that you're saying that on the show, and I think our more liberal listeners might go, "There's no way," but it matches up. You're not just talking that way. You really did play that out in your actions.
Well, and you brought up something that's, there is a difference between, as you said, you served in the minority versus newer members that don't have they've walked in always being in the role of we're in control, and maybe and hopefully not this attitude, but we can do whatever we want. And it does play a game.
I'm not going to name names. We have a few like that. They're like, why aren't we doing this? We have the supermajority. It's like, you know what? That's not why you govern certain ways. You do the things you think are priorities. So no, I do think that we. I hope that we are giving the message that we'll listen, we'll have these conversations. We don't. We will not always agree on the floor. We'll not agree on issues, but I hope you've never seen me to be disagreeable, and respectfully, I'm going to say I disagree with you.
I got to get my kid at daycare. Final question to you, Earl.
What?
I'm trying. We have
So, as you are in leadership, I know you alluded to this already, but what is, if someone's out there thinking about running, because we're not going to do this all forever.
Yeah.
Someone's thinking about running, they want to be a state legislator. What advice would you give to them in terms of making that decision and how they should go about it?
I would say, and we've implemented a mentor program, but I would say start there. If I live in Blake's district, if I live in Earl's district, I'm going to go to Earl and say, I'm thinking this might be something I'm interested in. Then take them under your wing. They're not going to come down here and hang out with you every day, type of thing. But I tell them, get to know why you're here. Kind of again, do you really want to do this? I got some kids back home who are like, man, I'm going to be a state rep someday. Why? Because you get to do a bunch of cool stuff. You mean like get yelled at and be up till 10 o'clock reading bills, that kind of stuff, and being away from your family? And it's like, no, you get to you get a man. It's like it's not the glamour I think people think it is. And so I think the reality of it is that's where we have to raise up servants who say, I really want to make a difference. And I think that's when you find them. You're going to find them in your district. You're going to find them in yours. I'll find them in mine. And then we'll bring them up and say, you know what, if you come in here with a servant's heart, willing to work with the other side on places you can agree, I think you get a lot accomplished.
Well, and I think part of, and I know this conversation has been had, is, and I've had people, in fact, recently I had a friend ask me this, have you thought about who's next? Yeah. And I said, well, the person I thought doesn't want to do this when I decide to,
Yeah.
when I decide to walk away. But I think you're right. I mean, people think, I remember I had friends who thought I was going to be flying in private jets to Washington, D.C., and it was going to be expensive, nice dinners.
He doesn't. Blake and I do.
So I'm not part of that club.
No, you're
He
right.
takes a skateboard to work every day.
I'm hoping for a scooter next week.
That's right.
But, it is a different life than people think it is. And so
Yeah.
I think mentoring is a good way to play that. I mean, I had the advantage of being around it for almost all my life.
you
or
had
a big
two
chunk
great
of my
mentors.
life.
Yeah,
I
you
did.
did.
I did. God bless them and thank them for being my parents.
did.
But, there's a lot to this that people don't always realize isn't always fun. But, it's, for me, part of it also is just, as you alluded to also, is let's get some good stuff done.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal of it.
And
Okay.
I think we have.
So I know we need to wrap it up because Blake's phone is going off. And he's looking
My
at
wife
me.
is literally
Your
calling
wife
me
is
like,
literally
where
calling
you're
you.
getting the kid. What's going on?
Exactly.
You just lost my vote.
Again. She might run against you.
Yeah.
God, that'd be bad for me. Yeah.
Well,
Go knock on doors for your wife.
I'm going to give her a fundraiser.
All right. I get it, guys. Let's wrap this up.
Well, Leader Lehman, thank you for joining us.
No,
We
thank you.
appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. And we do appreciate your insight and appreciate, as you talked about, your relationships with not just Republicans, but Democrats on the other side of the aisle. So
Yeah,
thanks for joining us.
You guys are all right.
We're better than mediocre.
agree.
We're better than mediocre.
You're just a notch above mediocre.
Yeah.
Well, one of you is.
We'll see you next
We'll
time.
see you next time. Thank you, everybody.